Guys. So I didn't want to leave you without sharing the rest of the story. So obviously, Ernest Green does get to graduate at the end of the 1957-58 school year, but he doesn't solve the crisis by graduating. Right? There's still a lot of division in Little Rock about how they're going to cope with the process of integration at Central High. It's not a simple question, which I think maybe you've realized through the documents we've been looking at. So as we move forward into the 1958-59 school year, things are actually heating up quite a bit. Local businesses in Little Rock were beginning to suffer because people who were hardline segregationists were actually proposing uh, boycotts and carrying out boycotts of people who were more moderate or even people who were in favor of integrating the schools. And in fact, these boycotts had a really damaging effect on new businesses coming into the area. Even companies who were planning to move to Little Rock were choosing to back out based on what was happening in Little Rock. Some of that was because of the violence and kind of the negative press that comes with having riots in your town. And some of that is because of the economic impact of boycotting those businesses. So the school board in Little Rock tries to make a case to a district court that they should be allowed to put a moratorium, a hold on integration, that they just needed more time to make it work. The district court agreed with them. However, an appeal was filed basically immediately by the NAACP to say that's not acceptable because the Brown versus Board decision played by the Supreme Court and all of the instructions that followed that indicated that schools needed to be desegregated with all deliberate speed, right? With all due haste, you have to do this and do it now. Uh, the appeals court, right? So the next level in the court's process actually sided with Brown as they should have and told the schools in Little Rock that's too bad, right? You need to just get it together and make this happen. That's the law. The school board level appealed again and went all the way to the Supreme Court again. And the Supreme Court essentially said, we told you what we told you. It's time to integrate. There is no more time. You have to do this. Right. So back at the state level, our Governor Orville Faubus has gotten a little, he's gotten bold. Right. He started speaking out publicly against President Eisenhower, mostly in response to his usage of federal troops and his federalizing of the Arkansas National Guard to ensure that Central High was going to be integrated by the Little Rock Nine. He accused Eisenhower of creating a police state, of abusing his position to make things happen in Little Rock that people in Little Rock didn't want, right? And a lot of his feeling bold about that was because Eisenhower was trying to be hands off at that point. After the 101st Airborne was recalled, Eisenhower, his advisors, all of this, they weren't really actively involved in the day to day management of things on the ground in Little Rock. And even more so than that, they had chosen not to pursue and prosecute people who were causing really severe disruptions and violence in the city. So, for example, a segregationist tried to plant a bomb or explode a bomb at Mrs. Daisy Bates's house. So, remember, she's the president of Arkansas's NAACP. Nothing was done to prosecute that person. And that's pretty reflective of the long term responses, I guess is what we'll say, of Eisenhower and his administration. So Faubus pushed forward, let's call it a bill, something kind of like an executive order, basically. It was his plan to allow the citizens who lived in Little Rock to vote on the status of the schools. And on the ballot, there were basically two options because the Supreme Court had told them you have to integrate. And these two options were one, go ahead and keep the schools open and integrate them the way that the federal government says is necessary, or two, just shut every school in the city of Little Rock. When it came time for the 1958-1959 school year, there were no open schools in the city of Little Rock. Every high school was shut down. So what that meant for students was they either had to start attending like private schools, right, church schools, home schools, using correspondence courses. So that's kind of like the analog precursor to what we've been doing with COVID-19 and distance learning, except it would involve more typewriters and stamps, or just move out of the area, right? Go stay with friends somewhere to go to school, move to or commute to a school that's outside of the district in Little Rock, or just drop out of school. Like if it wasn't reasonable for you to achieve those things, there were no other options to get an education. So the year 1958 to 59 is actually referred to as the lost year for the schools in Little Rock. So after that year, and parents and communities had to cope with the reality of not having education options for their children in the city of Little Rock, they really came together to come to the table. Right? A new school board is formed with 6 new members. Unfortunately, there's an even split in who's elected. So 3 of these members are very pro-segregation, the other 3 are pro-integration, and as you can imagine, that causes some major issues in hiring and firing practices, just before the schools are set to possibly reopen in August, in the fall of 1959. The pro-segregation section of the school board issues some directives to fire something like 44 teachers in the school district whom they thought were likely to support integration. So it's a whole mess, right? Eventually, things are resolved when groups of parents and community members come together and decide it's time to stop the nonsense. Our kids need to go back to school, and they're going to be attending integrated schools because that's what the law says. So schools in Little Rock don't reopen until the fall of 1959, right? So we do still see some of the long term consequences, let's call it that, or legacies perhaps of integration and segregation and Central High. So often, if you like travel abroad, right, or interact with people from, I've experienced this, people from other states and tell them where you're from. For a lot of folks, the only idea they have about Arkansas is Central High, right? The story is still being taught in history classes as it should. That's why we're talking about it. But it's become sort of part of the Arkansas narrative, right, in a very big way. You can go visit Central High. It's now a national park site, and across the street from the high school is a National Park Service museum. And they have park interpreters there who tell the story. And if you're very lucky and it's not a busy day, sometimes they'll take you into the school. So if you are in Little Rock and have the time, maybe go see the rooms where it happened. Okay? So I hope you're all doing very well. And if you have questions, just let me know.